The Barrett M82 anti-material rifle weighs 28.7 pounds. The M240B machine gun weighs 27.1 pounds. Combined ammunition load adds another 35 pounds of dead weight. When 24-year-old Sergeant Maya Rodriguez shouldered both weapons and began the grueling 20-mile forced march through Colorado's unforgiving mountain terrain, her commanding officers were already placing bets on how many miles she'd last before collapsing. They'd spent 2 years telling her she lacked the physical strength for elite infantry operations. She was about to prove them devastatingly wrong. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning formation at Fort Carson's 4th Infantry Division began at 0500 sharp, but Maya Rodriguez had been awake since 300. She stood in the pre-dawn darkness of the Colorado Springs Assembly area, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp mountain air as she watched the sun begin its climb over the Rocky Mountains. The base hummed with familiar energy, diesel generators powering equipment, the distant sound of PT formations calling cadence, and the steady rhythm of boots on asphalt as the day shift took over from night security. Maya had been stationed at Fort Carson for 18 months, and every morning felt like a test she wasn't allowed to take. At 24, she stood exactly 5 feet 4 inches in her combat boots and weighed 128 pounds after a full meal. Her fellow soldiers had nicknamed her Pocket, though it was said with the kind of affection reserved for someone they genuinely liked but never quite took seriously. They'd watched her excel in every technical aspect of her military occupational specialty, weapons maintenance, ballistics calculations, equipment logistics, but when it came to the physically demanding roles that defined combat operations, she was consistently relegated to support positions. The weapons she maintained could have told stories of her competence. Maya could field strip and reassemble an M240B machine gun in under 3 minutes, blindfolded, in conditions that would challenge soldiers with twice her experience. She understood the mechanical intricacies of the Barrett M82 better than most designated marksmen, could calculate optimal ammunition loads for various mission profiles, and had memorized the ballistic characteristics of every weapon system in her unit's inventory. But technical knowledge, her superiors constantly reminded her, wasn't the same as operational capability. Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson, her immediate supervisor, embodied the institutional skepticism that shadowed Maya's daily existence. Thompson was a career infantry soldier who'd served 3 combat deployments and measured capability primarily through physical metrics. At 6 feet 2 inches and 210 pounds of muscle earned through years of military conditioning, he represented everything the Army valued in combat personnel: size, strength, and an unshakable confidence in traditional approaches to warfare. Rodriguez, Thompson's voice carried across the motor pool where Maya was conducting morning equipment inspections, finish up the weapons inventory and report to the supply sergeant. We need someone to coordinate ammunition resupply for next week's training exercise. Ammunition resupply. Again. Maya nodded professionally, hiding the familiar frustration that had become her constant companion. While her platoon prepared for advanced combat training scenarios, she would be counting bullets and managing paperwork. The irony wasn't lost on her that she probably understood ammunition characteristics better than most of the soldiers who would be firing it downrange. Captain Jennifer Walsh, the company commander, had tried to be encouraging during Maya's last performance evaluation. "Your technical scores are exceptional, Rodriguez. Your attention to detail is exactly what we need in logistical support roles. But infantry operations require specific physical capabilities that can't be developed through knowledge alone." The conversation had taken place in Walsh's office, surrounded by maps of training areas where Maya had never been allowed to operate. Through the window, she could see members of her platoon conducting tactical movement drills, practicing the skills she'd studied extensively but never been permitted to demonstrate in an operational context. "Ma'am," Maya had asked carefully, "what would it take to be considered for combat roles? What specific standards would I need to meet?" Walsh had consulted Maya's file, flipping through pages of consistently excellent evaluations before answering. "The Army physical fitness test is just the baseline, Rodriguez. Combat operations require carrying heavy equipment over long distances, often in challenging terrain. The reality is that most of our mission profiles require soldiers who can handle equipment loads that exceed your body weight. The mathematics were stark and seemingly insurmountable. Standard combat load for her military occupational specialty averaged 80 to 90 pounds of equipment, not including mission-specific weapon systems that could add another 30 to 50 pounds. Maya's body weight of 128 pounds meant she would be carrying nearly her own weight in gear, a ratio that conventional wisdom deemed impractical for sustained operations. But conventional wisdom, Maya had begun to suspect, might not account for factors that weren't easily quantifiable on fitness reports and equipment specifications. Her small frame, while lacking the raw strength of larger soldiers, offered advantages that weren't recognized in traditional military assessment. Lower center of gravity provided better stability on uneven terrain. Reduced body mass meant more efficient energy expenditure during long-distance movement. Compact stature allowed navigation through spaces that might challenge larger personnel. These advantages remained theoretical because Maya had never been given opportunities to demonstrate them under operational conditions. Her exceptional performance in controlled training environments was dismissed as irrelevant to real-world mission demands. The circular logic was maddening. She couldn't prove her capabilities with operational experience, but she couldn't gain operational experience with proven capabilities. The weapons storage facility became Maya's refuge during off-duty hours. While other soldiers socialized or relaxed, she spent time with the equipment she maintained, studying not just technical specifications but practical applications. The Barrett M82 in particular fascinated her with its precision engineering and devastating capability. She'd memorized its complete specifications: 28.7 pounds unloaded, 48 to 56 inches in length depending on configuration, effective range exceeding 1,800 meters. More importantly, she'd studied how the weapon was employed in actual combat situations. Historical analysis of sniper operations revealed that successful long-range engagement often depended more on patience, environmental awareness, and precise calculation than on raw physical strength. The soldiers who excelled with the Barrett M82 weren't necessarily the largest or strongest, but those who understood how to work with the weapon's characteristics rather than fighting against them. The M240B machine gun presented different challenges but similar principles. At 27.1 pounds, it was designed for sustained automatic fire that could suppress enemy positions or provide covering fire for advancing troops. Traditional doctrine emphasized the importance of large, strong soldiers who could handle the weapon's weight and recoil during extended engagements. But Maya had observed that the most effective machine gunners weren't just strong, they were smart about positioning, ammunition management, and tactical employment. Her unofficial research extended beyond weapon specifications to the soldiers who used them most effectively. Maya spent countless hours studying after-action reports, combat footage, and training documentation that revealed patterns invisible to casual observation. The most successful combat operations often succeeded because of careful preparation, intelligent planning, and precise execution rather than overwhelming physical force. During equipment maintenance sessions, Maya practiced techniques that weren't part of standard training curricula. She learned to carry heavy weapons using biomechanical principles that distributed weight more efficiently across her frame. She studied hiking and mountaineering techniques that allowed smaller individuals to traverse difficult terrain while carrying substantial loads. She analyzed endurance sports methodology that emphasized efficiency over raw power. None of this preparation was officially recognized or encouraged. Maya's immediate supervisors saw her dedication to equipment maintenance but remained unaware of the broader capabilities she was developing. They appreciated her technical competence while dismissing her tactical potential, creating a professional environment where excellence was valued but advancement was limited by preconceptions about physical requirements. The frustration reached its peak during a platoon training exercise designed to test equipment proficiency under field conditions. Maya had prepared extensively for the scenario, studying terrain maps, weather patterns, and optimal tactical approaches. When the exercise began, she was assigned to base camp logistics while her fellow soldiers conducted the actual training mission. She watched from the command post as teams struggled with equipment malfunctions she could have prevented, navigation challenges she could have anticipated, and tactical problems she could have solved. Her expertise remained unused while soldiers with less knowledge but greater physical presence received opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities under realistic conditions. That evening, as the platoon debriefed their mixed results, Maya made a decision that would define the trajectory of her military career. She would find a way to prove that capability couldn't be measured purely through physical metrics, that intelligence and preparation could overcome limitations others considered insurmountable. The opportunity would come sooner than she expected, wrapped in a challenge that would test everything she'd learned during months of unofficial preparation. The exclusion patterns began subtly, like frost forming on windows, invisible at first, then impossible to ignore. Maya first noticed the shift during a routine briefing about upcoming training rotations when Staff Sergeant Thompson announced team assignments for advanced combat exercises. Her name was conspicuously absent from operational roles, relegated instead to equipment coordination and technical support. "Rodriguez," Thompson called out after dismissing the other soldiers, "you'll be managing gear accountability and maintenance schedules. Make sure all weapon systems are properly calibrated before each exercise." Maya stood at attention, fighting the urge to point out that she'd already performed those tasks flawlessly for 18 months. The assignments felt deliberately limiting, as if her supervisors were actively working to keep her away from anything that might demonstrate her actual capabilities. The pattern became more apparent during physical training sessions. While her platoon participated in combat-focused exercises, obstacle courses with full gear, tactical movement under load, weapons handling, Maya found herself assigned to alternative training designed for personnel with specialized roles. The euphemism stung worse than direct criticism. Specialist Jake Morrison, a recent transfer from Fort Bragg, pulled Maya aside after one particularly obvious exclusion. Morrison was one of the few soldiers who seemed genuinely puzzled by the treatment she received rather than simply accepting it as normal. "This doesn't make sense," Morrison said, keeping his voice low as they organized equipment after a training session. "You outperform half the guys in technical evaluations, but you're never included in the actual field exercises. What's the deal?" Maya had wondered the same thing countless times. "Apparently, I don't meet the physical requirements for combat operations," she replied, her tone carefully neutral to avoid sounding bitter or insubordinate. Morrison glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "Have you ever been tested under actual field conditions? Because from what I've seen, you handle equipment better than most of the soldiers who get selected for advanced training." The conversation highlighted something Maya had suspected but never articulated. She was being excluded based on assumptions rather than demonstrated performance. Her physical capabilities were being judged against theoretical standards rather than practical results. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The situation worsened when Sergeant First Class David Chen arrived as the new platoon sergeant. Chen brought with him a reputation for aggressive training methods and traditional views about combat readiness. During his first week, he conducted individual assessments of all platoon members, spending extensive time with each soldier to understand their capabilities and potential. Maya's assessment lasted exactly 7 minutes. "Rodriguez," Chen began, consulting her personnel file while she stood at attention in his office. "Your technical scores are impressive. Weapons maintenance, equipment accountability, administrative tasks, all excellent. But this is a combat unit, not a technical support company." Maya waited for him to continue, hoping he might ask about her actual capabilities rather than making decisions based on her file. "I'm implementing new training standards," Chen continued. "Combat-focused exercises, realistic mission scenarios, physical challenges that mirror actual deployment conditions. These training programs require specific physical capabilities that align with operational demands." The unspoken message was clear. Maya wouldn't be participating in the new training standards because her physical attributes didn't align with Chen's vision of operational demands. "Sergeant, respectfully," Maya ventured, "could I have the opportunity to attempt these training standards, even if just to establish a baseline for my capabilities?" Chen looked up from her file with an expression that mixed surprise with condescension. "Rodriguez, these aren't academic exercises. We're talking about carrying 80 to 90 pounds of equipment over mountainous terrain, often for 15 to 20 miles. Mission success depends on soldiers who can handle those demands without becoming liabilities to their teams." Mathematics again. I'm always studying mathematics. Maya's body weight versus equipment load, her physical dimensions versus theoretical requirements, her gender versus traditional expectations of combat soldiers. "I understand the demands, Sergeant," Maya replied carefully. "I'm requesting the opportunity to demonstrate whether I can meet them." Chen closed her file with finality. "Your role in this platoon is technical support. Focus on excelling in that area rather than pursuing assignments that aren't appropriate for your capabilities." The exclusion became systematic over the following weeks. Advanced marksmanship training, tactical movement courses, leadership development programs, all opportunities that could have enhanced Maya's military career were consistently denied or assigned to others with operational potential. The most painful exclusion came during selection for the Mountain Warfare School, an elite training program conducted in Vermont that taught specialized skills for combat in high-altitude, cold-weather environments. Maya had studied mountain warfare extensively, understood the unique challenges of high-altitude operations, and knew her compact frame might actually provide advantages in the demanding mountain environment. "Limited slots available," Chen announced during the selection briefing. "Priority goes to soldiers with demonstrated physical capability and operational readiness." Maya wasn't even considered for selection, despite having higher fitness scores than several soldiers who were chosen for the program. Her technical knowledge of mountain warfare equipment was deemed irrelevant because she lacked the physical presence required for mountain operations. Private First Class Tyler Brooks, a soldier with less than 6 months of experience, received one of the coveted spots. Brooks was 6 feet tall and weighed 195 pounds, meeting the physical profile that commanders associated with mountain warfare capability, even though his technical knowledge and equipment proficiency were significantly lower than Maya's. "Nothing personal, Rodriguez," Brooks mentioned after the selection announcement. "I'm sure they'll have other opportunities that are more suited to your strengths." Other opportunities. Always other opportunities. Never the opportunities that mattered, never the training that could advance her career, never the chance to prove that capability couldn't be measured through height and weight specifications. The psychological impact was carefully calibrated, whether intentionally or through unconscious institutional bias. Maya found herself questioning her own judgment, wondering if her supervisors were correct about her limitations. Maybe she was overestimating her capabilities. Maybe her desire for combat roles was unrealistic given her physical characteristics. The doubt was reinforced through daily interactions that emphasized her peripheral status within the platoon. During tactical discussions, her input was politely acknowledged but rarely incorporated into planning. Her suggestions about equipment optimization were implemented without credit or recognition. Her insights about potential training improvements were noted but dismissed as outside her area of responsibility. Staff Sergeant Thompson proved particularly skilled at delivering criticism disguised as guidance. During a weapons maintenance inspection, he questioned every detail of Maya's work with excessive scrutiny that he didn't apply to other soldiers. "This barrel cleaning isn't quite to standard," Thompson observed, examining an M240B that Maya had cleaned to specifications that exceeded military requirements. Combat operations require equipment maintenance that goes beyond textbook procedures. Maya knew the cleaning was perfect, probably better than Thompson could have achieved. But questioning his assessment would be seen as insubordination, so she accepted the criticism and re-cleaned equipment that was already immaculate. The pattern extended to administrative tasks where Maya's exceptional competence became a trap that limited her opportunities. Because she performed logistical duties so effectively, commanders were reluctant to reassign her to roles that might disrupt supply chain efficiency. "We need Rodriguez handling equipment accountability," Captain Walsh explained during a staff meeting that Maya overheard through the open office door. "She's too valuable in that position to risk losing her effectiveness in training exercises that might not play to her strengths." Too valuable to advance, too competent to challenge, too useful in support roles to consider for operational positions. Maya's excellence had become a barrier to progression rather than a pathway to opportunity. The exclusion reached its culmination when the platoon received orders for advanced combat training at the National Training Center in California. The training exercise would simulate realistic combat scenarios using actual mission equipment and challenging desert terrain. It represented exactly the kind of opportunity Maya had been preparing for through months of unofficial study and physical conditioning. Her assignment: remain at Fort Carson to manage equipment left behind and coordinate resupply operations for the training unit. Someone needs to maintain base operations, Chen explained when Maya inquired about the assignment. Your technical expertise is needed here more than in the field. Maya watched her platoon load equipment and board transportation for training that would advance their careers, while she remained behind, managing an empty motor pool and maintaining equipment for soldiers who were gaining experience she would never be allowed to pursue. The systematic exclusion was complete. She had been officially categorized as permanently unsuitable for combat operations, regardless of her actual capabilities or potential for development. The institution had decided her limitations were insurmountable, and no amount of competence or dedication would change that assessment. But institutions, Maya was beginning to understand, could be wrong about many things. While her platoon trained in California's Mojave Desert, Maya transformed the empty barracks and motor pool into her personal training laboratory. The solitude that was meant to isolate her became the foundation for the most intensive preparation program she'd ever undertaken. With no supervisors monitoring her activities and no official duties beyond basic facility maintenance, she finally had the freedom to test theories she'd been developing for months. The weight room became her first laboratory. Maya had studied biomechanics extensively, analyzing how smaller athletes in endurance sports carried loads efficiently over long distances. Traditional military strength training emphasized maximum lifting capacity, but Maya focused on functional strength that would translate to carrying heavy equipment over extended periods. She developed a training regimen based on progressive load-bearing that started with her standard combat gear, 35 pounds of basic equipment, and gradually increased weight while maintaining movement efficiency. Instead of trying to build maximum muscle mass, which her genetic makeup wouldn't support, Maya concentrated on developing muscular endurance and cardiovascular efficiency that would allow sustained performance under load. The empty motor pool provided space for testing equipment carrying techniques that weren't taught in standard military training. Maya experimented with different load distribution methods, studying how mountaineers and expedition travelers managed heavy packs over challenging terrain. She discovered that proper weight distribution could make a 70-pound load feel significantly lighter than a poorly balanced 50-pound setup. Most importantly, she learned to work with her body's natural mechanics rather than fighting against them. Her compact frame and lower center of gravity, traditionally seen as disadvantages, could actually provide stability advantages when carrying awkwardly shaped weapons like the Barrett M82 and M240B. The key was finding carrying positions that utilized her skeletal structure efficiently rather than relying purely on muscular strength. The base library became her evening refuge, where Maya consumed everything available about endurance physiology, high-altitude performance, and military load-carrying studies. She discovered research that contradicted conventional assumptions about physical requirements for combat operations. Studies of special operations forces revealed that mission success correlated more strongly with mental resilience and technical competence than with raw physical strength. One study particularly captured her attention: an analysis of long-range patrol effectiveness in mountainous terrain. The research showed that smaller, lighter soldiers often outperformed larger counterparts during extended operations because they required less caloric intake, generated less heat signature, and could maintain pace longer without fatigue-induced performance degradation. Maya began incorporating altitude simulation into her training routine, using elevation masks and breathing techniques that would prepare her cardiovascular system for high-altitude operations. Colorado's elevation already provided natural training advantages, but she pushed further, developing lung capacity and oxygen efficiency that would serve her well in mountainous environments. The weapons themselves became integral to her preparation. During her official duties maintaining platoon equipment, Maya practiced carrying techniques with every weapon system in inventory. She learned to handle the Barrett M82's 28.7-pound bulk using methods that distributed weight across her frame rather than concentrating stress on individual muscle groups. The M240B machine gun presented different challenges due to its awkward balance and feeding mechanism. But Maya discovered that proper sling positioning and body mechanics could make the 27.1-pound weapon manageable for extended carry. She practiced transitioning between carrying positions to prevent muscle fatigue and maintain mobility over long distances. Her most innovative training development involved combined load carrying with actual weapons and ammunition. Maya calculated the total weight burden for various mission profiles: Barrett M82 with 200 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, M240B with 600 rounds of 7.62, plus standard combat gear, and designed training progressions that built up to those exact loads. The progression started with short distances carrying full weight, gradually extending range while maintaining movement speed and efficiency. Maya tracked her progress meticulously, noting improvements in endurance, stability, and recovery time. What had seemed impossible during her first attempts became routine after weeks of systematic preparation. Physical conditioning represented only one aspect of her comprehensive preparation. Maya studied terrain analysis, weather pattern recognition, and navigation techniques that would be crucial during long-distance operations in challenging environments. She memorized topographical features of training areas throughout Colorado, analyzing optimal routes for movement under load. Her understanding of equipment optimization extended beyond basic maintenance to field modifications that could improve performance under operational conditions. Maya learned to adjust sling systems for better weight distribution, modify ammunition carrying methods for easier access, and streamline gear configurations to eliminate unnecessary bulk. The psychological preparation proved equally important. Maya researched mental techniques used by endurance athletes and special operations personnel to maintain performance during extended periods of physical stress. She practiced visualization methods, developed positive self-talk strategies, and built mental resilience that would sustain her when physical discomfort threatened to overwhelm her determination. Sleep management became part of her training regimen. Maya experimented with rest cycles that would allow recovery during multi-day operations, studying how elite military units maintained effectiveness during sleep-deprived conditions. She learned to function efficiently on minimal sleep while carrying full equipment loads. Nutrition science provided another avenue for optimization. Maya calculated calorie requirements for extended operations, identified food combinations that would provide sustained energy without excess weight or bulk. She tested various hydration strategies to maintain performance while minimizing water weight during long-distance movement. Her preparation extended to emergency medical procedures that might be necessary during operations where immediate support wasn't available. Maya studied trauma care, emergency stabilization techniques, and medical equipment that could be integrated into standard load configurations without significantly increasing weight burden. Technical communication skills became part of her training focus. Maya practiced radio procedures, emergency protocols, and coordination techniques that would be essential during complex operations. She studied tactical communication methods that allowed efficient information transfer even under stress or in challenging acoustic environments. Weather adaptation formed another component of her comprehensive preparation. Maya trained in various weather conditions, learning how temperature extremes, precipitation, and wind affected equipment performance and physical capability. She developed clothing and equipment strategies for maintaining effectiveness across different environmental conditions. The most challenging aspect of her preparation involved testing theoretical knowledge under realistic stress conditions. Maya designed training scenarios that simulated operational pressure, carrying full equipment loads while navigating complex terrain under time constraints, managing multiple tasks while maintaining situational awareness, performing technical procedures while physically fatigued. These self-designed tests revealed capabilities that exceeded her own expectations. Maya discovered she could carry combined equipment loads approaching 90 pounds over distances that would challenge soldiers significantly larger than herself. More importantly, she maintained technical proficiency and decision-making capability even when physically stressed. Her marksmanship training continued throughout this period, focusing specifically on shooting accuracy while fatigued from extended load-carrying exercises. Maya practiced engaging targets after hiking several miles with full equipment, simulating conditions where precision shooting might be required following exhausting movement. The results consistently demonstrated that her accuracy remained high even after physical exertion that would degrade performance in less prepared personnel. Her months of endurance training had built not just physical capability, but also mental focus that transcended temporary discomfort. Equipment customization became an ongoing project as Maya refined her load-carrying systems based on practical experience. She developed personal modifications that optimized weight distribution, improved access to critical equipment, and enhanced mobility without compromising mission capability. Documentation of her progress revealed transformation that bordered on miraculous. What had started as theoretical preparation based on academic research had evolved into practical capability that exceeded standard military expectations. Maya had systematically addressed every limitation that others considered insurmountable. The comprehensive nature of her preparation meant she was ready for opportunities that might never come. Maya had transformed herself into a specialized asset whose capabilities were invisible to commanders who continued to evaluate her based on outdated assumptions about physical requirements. But preparation, Maya had learned, was worthless without opportunity to demonstrate its value. She needed a situation that would reveal her true capabilities to skeptics who had written her off as permanently unsuitable for combat operations. That opportunity would arrive sooner than anyone expected, demanding exactly the combination of endurance, technical skill, and mental resilience that Maya had spent months developing in solitude. The emergency alert pierced through the quiet Monday morning routine at Fort Carson like a blade through silence. Maya was conducting final equipment inspections in the largely empty armory when the base-wide alarm system activated, its urgent wail echoing across the installation with an intensity that immediately commanded attention from every soldier within miles. She dropped her maintenance checklist and rushed toward the command center, joining the stream of remaining personnel who were responding to whatever crisis had triggered the highest-level alert. The skeletal crew left behind during the main unit's training deployment moved with practiced efficiency, but Maya could sense the underlying tension that came with skeleton staffing during an actual emergency. The Situation Room buzzed with activity as communications personnel established contact with regional command and emergency services throughout Colorado. Large displays showed topographical maps of the surrounding area, with red indicators beginning to populate locations that Maya recognized from her extensive terrain study. Colonel Patricia Martinez, the installation commander, stood at the center of the controlled chaos, coordinating with multiple agencies while information continued flowing from sources across the state. Maya had rarely seen Colonel Martinez during normal operations, but the colonel's reputation for decisive leadership under pressure was legendary throughout the division. "Confirmed," reported the senior communications specialist, "military transport carrying sensitive equipment and personnel. Weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly, making helicopter extraction impossible." Maya felt her pulse accelerate as she processed the implications. The Sangre de Cristo Range represented some of Colorado's most challenging mountain terrain, with peaks exceeding 14,000 feet and weather patterns that could turn deadly within hours. She'd studied those mountains extensively during her unauthorized preparation, understanding their unique challenges and potential approach routes. "Location is approximately 12,000 feet elevation," continued the report. "Survivors are confirmed, but injuries are severe. They're requesting immediate ground-based rescue and medical evacuation." Colonel Martinez studied the topographical display with growing concern. "What's our current capability for high-altitude rescue operations? Who do we have available for immediate deployment?" The answer that came back confirmed Maya's worst fears about skeleton crew limitations. Ma'am, most of our mountain-qualified personnel are currently deployed to California for training exercises. We have limited high-altitude rescue capability with current staffing levels. Maya watched as the colonel absorbed this information, clearly calculating resources against requirements and finding the equation dangerously unbalanced. The base's most experienced mountain warfare specialists, search and rescue teams, and cold weather operations experts were all 1,200 miles away in the Mojave Desert. Contact the Colorado National Guard, Martinez ordered. Request immediate assistance with high-altitude rescue operations. Also reach out to civilian mountain rescue organizations in the region. The communications specialist returned with responses that painted an increasingly dire picture. Ma'am, National Guard mountain rescue teams are committed to other operations. Civilian rescue organizations report that current weather conditions exceed safe operating parameters for their personnel and equipment. Maya studied the tactical display, recognizing terrain features she'd memorized during months of mountain warfare research. The crash site was located in an area accessible only through extremely challenging approaches that would test the limits of even experienced mountain soldiers. Standard rescue protocols would require specialized equipment and personnel trained specifically for high-altitude operations in severe weather. Survivor status update, came another report. Multiple injuries, including possible spinal trauma. Medical personnel are requesting immediate evacuation, but survivors cannot be moved without proper medical equipment and transportation. The mathematics of the situation were becoming clear and increasingly troubling. Injured personnel at 12,000 feet elevation, deteriorating weather, limited rescue capability, and time pressure created a complex problem that couldn't be solved through conventional approaches. Colonel Martinez turned to her available staff. Options? What resources do we have for immediate deployment to that location? The silence that followed revealed the scope of the challenge. Fort Carson's mountain rescue capabilities were severely limited, with most qualified personnel deployed elsewhere. The few remaining soldiers with mountain experience lacked the specialized training required for high-altitude rescue in severe weather conditions. Ma'am, ventured the operations officer, we could attempt deployment with available personnel, but the risk assessment is extremely unfavorable. The terrain requires specialized mountain warfare training that most of our remaining soldiers don't possess. Maya felt a familiar sensation, watching trained professionals acknowledge limitations that she had specifically prepared to overcome. Furthermore, continued the operations officer, the medical evacuation will require carrying injured personnel and life support equipment over approximately 20 miles of mountain terrain. The physical demands exceed standard operational parameters. 20 miles. Maya's pulse quickened as she realized the specific nature of the challenge. Her endurance training had been building towards exactly this requirement: long-distance load carrying in mountainous terrain under adverse conditions. Equipment requirements include advanced life support systems, spinal immobilization devices, and cold weather survival gear, added the medical officer. The total weight for the evacuation team will approach 100 pounds per person, not including standard combat equipment. Timelines are critical, emphasized the communications specialist. The weather forecast shows conditions worsening significantly within 6 hours. After that point, rescue becomes impossible for at least 72 hours. The window of opportunity was closing rapidly, and conventional resources were proving inadequate for the challenge. Maya stepped forward, knowing she was about to risk everything on capabilities that existed only in her private training records. "Ma'am," she said, addressing Colonel Martinez directly, "I believe I can handle that mission profile." Maya had anticipated this question and prepared her response based on tactical requirements she'd analyzed during months of mountain warfare study. "Ma'am, load me with the full equipment complement required for the rescue mission. Medical gear, communications equipment, survival supplies, weapon systems, and let me demonstrate movement capability over challenging terrain." "The full load weighs approximately 95 pounds, noted the logistics coordinator. Plus standard combat gear brings total weight to nearly 110 pounds. Are you seriously suggesting you can carry that load effectively?" Maya nodded without hesitation. "Yes, sir. I've trained specifically for that weight capacity." The claim sounded impossible to officers who measured capability through traditional physical metrics. Maya's compact frame carrying 110 pounds of equipment seemed to violate basic physics, let alone military practicality. Furthermore, continued the operations officer, the terrain test would need to simulate actual mountain conditions, elevation changes, unstable footing, navigation challenges. A parking lot demonstration wouldn't prove operational capability. Maya had expected this requirement as well. Sir, there's a training area approximately 8 miles from base that includes terrain comparable to the crash site approach route. I can demonstrate full mission capability there. Colonel Martinez consulted her watch, calculating time remaining before weather conditions made rescue impossible. The mathematics were unforgiving. Every minute spent on testing reduced the operational window for actual rescue. Rodriguez, even if you could somehow handle the physical demands, this mission requires technical expertise you haven't demonstrated. Mountain navigation, high-altitude medical procedures, emergency communications protocols. Maya watched precious time slip away while officers debated options that didn't exist, knowing that her months of preparation had created exactly the capability the situation demanded. But capability without recognition was worthless, and recognition required demonstration under conditions that might cost lives if she failed. The debate in the Situation Room continued for another agonizing 12 minutes while Maya watched the weather deterioration timeline compress their window of opportunity. Satellite imagery showed the approaching storm system that would make rescue impossible, and radio contact with the crash survivors was becoming increasingly intermittent as their emergency equipment batteries weakened in the sub-zero mountain conditions. Colonel Martinez finally cut through the discussion with the decisive authority that had earned her command position. I need realistic options, not theoretical discussions. What can we actually accomplish with available resources in the next 4 hours? The operations officer consulted his resource assessment one final time before delivering the stark reality. Ma'am, with current personnel and weather constraints, we cannot mount an effective rescue operation using conventional protocols. The physical demands exceed our available capability. Maya stepped forward again, knowing this might be her last opportunity to offer a solution. Colonel, I request permission to demonstrate my capability under test conditions. If I can prove I can handle the equipment load and terrain requirements, consider deploying me for the rescue mission. The medical officer immediately objected. Ma'am, we cannot risk additional casualties by sending unqualified personnel into conditions that challenge our most experienced mountain soldiers. Respectfully, sir, Maya replied, we're not risking additional casualties if I can demonstrate capability before deployment. Give me a realistic test of the mission requirements. If I fail, no harm done. If I succeed, you have a viable rescue option. Colonel Martinez studied Maya with calculating eyes, clearly weighing desperate circumstances against military protocols that weren't designed for situations like this. What exactly are you proposing, Rodriguez? The Situation Room fell silent, except for the static of radio communications and the hum of electronic equipment. Officers exchanged glances that ranged from surprised to incredulous, clearly questioning why equipment maintenance personnel was offering input during a critical rescue operation. Colonel Martinez studied Maya with an expression that mixed confusion with annoyance. Sergeant Rodriguez, this is a specialized mountain rescue operation requiring capabilities that exceed normal training standards. Yes, ma'am, Maya replied steadily. I've prepared extensively for high-altitude operations. I can carry the required equipment load over the specified distance in current weather conditions. The claim hung in the air like an impossible promise. Several officers exchanged looks that suggested they questioned her understanding of the physical demands being discussed. Rodriguez, said the officer's officer, we're talking about carrying 100 pounds of equipment 20 miles through mountain terrain at 12,000 feet elevation in deteriorating weather. This requires specialized training and physical capability that takes years to develop. Maya had spent months developing exactly those capabilities, but explaining her unauthorized preparation would require admitting to activities that exceeded her assigned duties. Sir, I've studied mountain warfare extensively. I understand the physical requirements and believe I can meet them. Colonel Martinez consulted Maya's personnel file on her tablet, scrolling through pages of technical evaluations and administrative duties. Your record shows no mountain warfare training, no high-altitude operations experience, no specialized rescue training. What exactly qualifies you for this type of mission? The question trapped Maya between honesty and operational necessity. Admitting her extensive unauthorized preparation would reveal months of activities that violated her orders to focus exclusively on assigned duties. But injured soldiers were facing death while qualified personnel debated solutions that weren't available. Sir, I've studied mountain warfare extensively. I understand the physical requirements and believe I can meet them. Colonel Martinez consulted Maya's personnel file on her tablet, scrolling through pages of technical evaluations and administrative duties. Your record shows no mountain warfare training, no high-altitude operations experience, no specialized rescue training. What exactly qualifies you for this type of mission? The question trapped Maya between honesty and operational necessity. Admitting her extensive unauthorized preparation would reveal months of activities that violated her orders to focus exclusively on assigned duties. But injured soldiers were facing death while qualified personnel debated solutions that weren't available. Ma'am, I've prepared for this type of operation through personal study and conditioning. I understand it's unconventional, but I believe I have the capabilities required. The medical officer stepped forward with obvious skepticism. Rodriguez, even if you could handle the physical demands, this mission requires medical training for treating spinal injuries, hypothermia, and altitude-related complications. Do you have medical qualifications? Maya had indeed studied emergency medical procedures extensively, but her training existed only in personal research rather than official certification. Sir, I've studied combat medical procedures and emergency trauma care. Studied where? Demanded the operations officer. When did you receive medical training that isn't documented in your personnel file? The interrogation was revealing the scope of Maya's unauthorized preparation while simultaneously highlighting the crisis of capability that threatened the rescue mission. She possessed exactly the skills required, but they existed outside official channels that military bureaucracy recognized. Colonel Martinez raised her hand to halt the discussion, her expression revealing the weight of command decisions during crisis situations. The bottom line is simple. Do we have qualified personnel available for immediate deployment, or do we wait for resources that may not arrive in time? The silence that followed confirmed what everyone understood, but no one wanted to acknowledge. Fort Carson lacked the immediate capability to mount an effective rescue operation with available resources. Maya took a careful breath before responding. Ma'am, I've studied all those subjects extensively. I understand mountain navigation using map and compass in whiteout conditions. I know emergency medical procedures for spinal stabilization and hypothermia treatment. I'm qualified on all communications equipment in our inventory. The silence that followed revealed the scope of Maya's unauthorized preparation while highlighting the institutional failure that had kept her capabilities hidden. She possessed exactly the expertise required, but it existed outside official recognition. When did you acquire this training? Demanded the operations officer. None of this appears in your personnel file or training records. Maya faced the moment she'd been dreading, admitting to months of preparation that violated her orders to focus exclusively on assigned duties. Sir, I conducted personal study and training during off-duty hours. I believed these skills might be valuable for mission requirements. The admission confirmed suspicions about her unauthorized activities, while simultaneously revealing capabilities that could save lives. Maya had violated direct orders while creating exactly the assets the current crisis demanded. Colonel Martinez made her decision with the cold calculation required during emergency situations. I'm authorizing a field demonstration. Rodriguez, you have 1 hour to prove you can handle mission-critical equipment loads over realistic terrain. If you fail, we explore alternative options. If you succeed, we will discuss deployment. The test was hastily organized using available personnel and equipment from the base's limited resources. Maya would carry the complete rescue mission loadout: advanced medical equipment, emergency communications gear, survival supplies, and weapons systems over an 8-mile route through foothills terrain that approximated conditions at the crash site. Master Sergeant Lisa Park, the senior non-commissioned officer remaining on base, supervised the equipment loading with professional skepticism that bordered on concern for Maya's safety. Rodriguez, this load configuration has never been tested with someone your size. The weight distribution alone could cause serious injury. Maya accepted each piece of equipment methodically, using load-bearing techniques she'd refined during months of private training. The Barrett M82 rifle went across her back using a custom sling configuration that distributed its 28.7-pound weight across her torso rather than concentrating stress on her shoulders. The M240B machine gun at 27.1 pounds required a different carrying position to balance the load and prevent interference with movement. Maya had practiced transitions between carrying positions that allowed sustained movement without excessive fatigue on specific muscle groups. Medical equipment presented unique challenges due to awkward shapes and fragile components that couldn't be damaged during transport. Maya secured the spinal immobilization board, advanced life support systems, and emergency medical supplies using methods that protected equipment while maintaining access for emergency use. Communications gear, survival equipment, ammunition, and standard combat loadout brought the total weight to 108 pounds, nearly 85% of Maya's body weight. Officers watching the loading process exchanged glances that suggested they expected rapid failure once movement began. The demonstration route follows the perimeter trail through elevation changes totaling 1,200 feet. Terrain includes loose rock, steep grades, and stream crossings that simulate mountain rescue conditions. Maya adjusted her equipment one final time, settling the load using biomechanical principles that worked with her body structure rather than fighting against it. The weight was substantial but manageable using techniques she developed specifically for this type of challenge. "Ma'am," she reported to Colonel Martinez, "ready for demonstration." The first mile revealed Maya's unconventional but effective approach to heavy load carrying. Instead of the aggressive pace that larger soldiers typically employed, she maintained a steady rhythm that conserved energy while covering ground efficiently. Her compact frame and lower center of gravity provided stability advantages on uneven terrain. Officers following in vehicles watched with growing amazement as Maya navigated steep sections, stream crossings, and loose rock without the mechanical problems they'd expected. Her movement appeared effortless despite carrying a load that would challenge soldiers significantly larger than herself. At the 3-mile mark, Master Sergeant Park called for an equipment check to verify that Maya wasn't compromising mission capability for movement efficiency. The inspection revealed that all equipment remained properly secured and accessible with no damage from transport. Maya's breathing was elevated but controlled, her movement steady and confident. "Good to continue, Sergeant. Equipment is secure and accessible." The second half of the demonstration included the most challenging terrain, steep ascents that simulated the mountain approaches required for the actual rescue mission. Maya's pace remained consistent as she navigated obstacles that would test even experienced mountain soldiers. Her load-bearing techniques proved most effective during the steepest sections, where proper weight distribution allowed her to maintain balance and momentum while larger soldiers might have struggled with unwieldy equipment loads. At the 6-mile mark, Maya demonstrated emergency medical procedures while carrying full equipment, proving she could perform mission-critical tasks even while burdened with rescue gear. Her technical proficiency under load impressed observers who had questioned her capabilities. The final 2 miles included navigation challenges using map and compass in simulated low-visibility conditions. Maya's performance revealed mountain navigation skills that exceeded most soldiers' capabilities regardless of their physical size. When she completed the 8-mile demonstration in under 2 hours while maintaining mission-ready equipment status, the watching officers fell silent. Maya had systematically demolished every assumption about her limitations while proving capabilities that exceeded their expectations. Colonel Martinez approached as Maya completed final equipment checks, her expression revealing recalculation of possibilities she'd previously dismissed. "Rodriguez," the colonel said quietly, "that was the most impressive load-carrying demonstration I've witnessed in 23 years of military service. But the actual rescue mission will be significantly more challenging than this test." Maya stood at attention, her equipment properly secured and her confidence unshaken by the challenge ahead. "Ma'am, I understand the risks. I believe I can complete the mission successfully." The colonel studied her for a long moment before making the decision that would define both their careers. "Gear up for deployment, Sergeant. You're going to bring those people home." The helicopter insertion lasted exactly 14 minutes through deteriorating weather that tested the limits of aviation safety protocols. Maya sat in the cargo bay of the UH-60 Blackhawk, her 110-pound equipment load secured around her as the aircraft fought through mountain turbulence that would have grounded civilian flights hours earlier. Through the open door, she watched Colorado's Sangre de Cristo peaks emerge from cloud cover like ancient monuments to endurance and determination. The terrain below represented everything she'd studied during months of mountain warfare: knife-edge ridges, vertical cliff faces, and snow-covered slopes that could kill inexperienced climbers within minutes. "LZ coming up in 2 minutes," announced the crew chief over the intercom. "The weather's getting worse fast. This might be our last flight in or out for the next 72 hours. Maya double-checked her equipment one final time, running through mental checklists she'd memorized during countless hours of preparation. Medical supplies secured and accessible, communications gear tested and functional, navigation equipment calibrated for the specific terrain coordinates, emergency survival kit distributed throughout her load for redundancy. The landing zone was a narrow clearing at 9,800 feet elevation, approximately 3 miles from the crash site through terrain that would challenge Olympic-level mountaineers. Maya had studied satellite imagery of the approach route, identifying potential hazards and optimal movement coordinates that would minimize exposure to avalanche danger and cliff face exposure.
"Touchdown in 30 seconds, called the pilot. "Rodriguez, are you sure about this? Once we leave, you're committed until the weather clears enough for extraction." Maya keyed her helmet microphone with steady confidence. "Roger that. I understand the commitment. Bring those people home." The helicopter touched down with rotor wash that created a blinding snow cloud around the landing zone. Maya moved quickly through the whiteout conditions, using techniques she'd practiced for exactly this scenario. Her equipment load felt familiar and manageable as she established footing on the uneven mountain terrain. Within seconds, the Black Hawk lifted off and disappeared into the storm clouds, leaving Maya alone in mountain wilderness that could kill her if she made a single critical error. The silence that followed was absolute, except for wind through the peaks and the steady rhythm of her own breathing inside the cold weather mask. Maya activated her GPS navigation system and oriented herself toward the crash site, beginning the movement that would test every aspect of her unauthorized preparation. The first mile involved steady ascent through deep snow that required careful energy management to avoid early exhaustion. Her load-carrying techniques proved immediately valuable as she navigated obstacles that would have been impossible with conventional equipment configurations. The Barrett M82 and M240B weapon systems, properly distributed across her frame, provided balance rather than hindrance as she moved through challenging terrain. The mountain environment demanded constant decision-making about route selection, weather assessment, and energy conservation. Maya's months of study translated directly into practical choices that kept her moving efficiently toward the objective while avoiding hazards that could end the mission before it began. Radio contact with the crash survivors provided updates on their deteriorating condition. "Rescue team, this is the crash site. We have 2 casualties with spinal injuries, 1 severe hypothermia case, and 1 with altitude sickness complications. The medical situation is critical." Maya keyed her radio while continuing steady movement through knee-deep snow. "Crash site, this is a rescue team. The estimated arrival time is 2 hours. Maintain current position and continue warming protocols." The response carried surprise at her voice and apparent single-person status. Rescue team, confirm team size. How many personnel are approaching our location? Maya had anticipated this question and prepared her response carefully. Crash site, single rescuer with full medical and extraction capability. I repeat, one person with complete mission equipment. The silence that followed revealed their shock at learning that their rescue depended on a single soldier carrying enough equipment to treat multiple casualties and coordinate evacuation. Maya understood their concern, but knew her preparation had created exactly the capability required. The second mile brought more challenging terrain as elevation increased and weather conditions worsened. Visibility dropped to less than 50 meters as snow intensified, requiring navigation by compass and GPS rather than visual landmarks. Maya's mountain navigation training proved essential as she maintained accurate heading despite whiteout conditions. Her physical conditioning showed its value as she climbed through increasingly thin air without the performance degradation that would affect less prepared personnel. Months of altitude simulation training had prepared her cardiovascular system for sustained effort at elevations approaching 12,000 feet. Equipment management became crucial as climbing required different load configurations than walking. Maya smoothly transitioned between carrying positions using techniques that kept critical gear accessible while maintaining mobility over obstacles that would challenge unloaded climbers. The crash site radio updates painted an increasingly urgent picture. Rescue team, hypothermia patient is losing consciousness. Spinal injury patients are showing signs of shock. We need immediate medical intervention. Maya decreased her pace despite the energy cost, knowing that speed now mattered more than conservation. Her endurance training had prepared her for exactly this type of decision, when to push beyond sustainable pace to meet critical timeline requirements. The third mile involved the most technically challenging terrain, a section requiring careful movement across unstable snow that concealed rock falls and potential cliff edges. Maya's small size provided advantages here, as her reduced weight distributed pressure more safely across questionable snow bridges. Navigation became increasingly complex as terrain features disappeared in the blowing snow. Maya relied on compass bearings and GPS coordinates, cross-referencing her position against memorized topographical details to maintain accurate movement toward the crash site. At the 10,500-foot elevation mark, she encountered conditions that would have turned back most rescue teams. Wind speeds exceeded 40 miles per hour, visibility dropped to less than 10 meters, and temperature fell below 0 Fahrenheit. Maya's cold weather preparation and proper equipment allowed her to continue when others would have been forced to seek shelter. Radio contact became intermittent as atmospheric conditions interfered with communications, but Maya maintained steady progress using dead reckoning navigation that she'd practiced extensively during her unauthorized training. Her confidence in her abilities remained unshaken despite environmental challenges that tested every aspect of her preparation. The fourth mile brought her within range of the crash site, but also presented the most dangerous terrain of the approach. A narrow traverse across a steep slope required precise footing and careful load management to avoid triggering avalanche conditions or losing balance on exposed sections. Maya's technical ropework training proved essential as she navigated sections requiring fixed anchors and controlled descent techniques. Her equipment load, while substantial, was configured to allow ropework without compromising safety or mission capability. Emergency radio contact crackled through the static as she approached the final approach. Rescue team, we can hear movement. Confirm your position relative to the crash site. Maya checked her GPS coordinates against known crash site location before responding. The rescue team is approximately 400 meters southeast of your position. Visibility is near 0. Can you provide audio signals for navigation? The response came immediately. Roger, rescue team. We're activating emergency whistle signals every 30 seconds. Follow the sound. Maya oriented toward the whistle signals and began the final approach through terrain that required careful movement to avoid stepping into hidden crevasses or unstable snow. Her load remained secure and accessible as she navigated the most challenging section of the entire mission.
The crash site appeared suddenly through the blowing snow, a military transport aircraft that had impacted on a relatively flat section of the mountain, with survivors sheltered in improvised lean-to structures using aircraft debris and emergency equipment. Maya established visual contact with 4 survivors, emergently assessing their medical status and environmental exposure. The scene confirmed radio reports: 2 spinal injury cases requiring immobilization, 1 severe hypothermia case needing immediate warming, and 1 with altitude sickness complications. "Rescue team on site," Maya announced over the radio, beginning medical assessment and treatment procedures. The survivors stared in amazement as a single soldier carrying massive equipment load emerged from the storm conditions that had prevented helicopter rescue. Their rescue depended entirely on one person's ability to carry them and critical medical equipment back through the same mountain terrain that had nearly killed her during approach.
Maya began unpacking medical equipment with practiced efficiency, her months of preparation transforming into life-saving action under conditions that would challenge experienced mountain rescue teams. The real test was just beginning, treating multiple critical patients and evacuating them through 20 miles of mountain wilderness in deteriorating weather. But as she looked at the injured survivors who depended on her capabilities, Maya felt only calm determination. Everything she'd trained for had led to this moment, and she was ready to prove that preparation could overcome any limitation others chose to impose. The medical triage took Maya exactly 18 minutes to complete, working with methodical precision that masked the complexity of treating multiple critical patients simultaneously in sub-zero mountain conditions. Her unauthorized medical training translated directly into life-saving procedures as she stabilized the hypothermia patient using emergency warming protocols, immobilized the spinal injury cases with proper technique, and administered altitude sickness treatment that prevented potentially fatal cerebral edema. Captain Robert Hayes, the senior surviving officer, watched in amazement as Maya worked with equipment efficiency that rivaled experienced combat medics. "Soldier, what's your medical background? Your technique is exceptional." Maya continued establishing IV lines while responding. "Sir, I've studied emergency medical procedures extensively. These patients are stable for transport, but we need to begin movement immediately. The weather window is closing rapidly." The evacuation plan Maya had developed during her approach required innovative solutions that conventional rescue doctrine wouldn't have considered. With 4 patients requiring various levels of medical support and only 1 rescuer available, she needed to move them in stages while maintaining life support capability throughout the 20-mile journey to the extraction point. "Sir, I'm going to evacuate patients individually," Maya explained to Captain Hayes, who remained conscious despite his altitude sickness. "Most critical cases first, with fastest turnaround time possible between trips." Hayes studied Maya's compact frame and the massive equipment load she'd already carried through impossible terrain. "Soldier, you're talking about making multiple round trips through mountain wilderness in these conditions. That's physically impossible for anyone, regardless of their capabilities." Maya was already configuring her equipment for patient transport, using techniques she'd practiced during countless hours of preparation that nobody knew about. "Sir, I've trained specifically for this scenario. The physics work if you understand proper load distribution and energy management." The first evacuation involved Sergeant Lisa Chen, the most critical hypothermia case whose core temperature had dropped to dangerous levels, requiring immediate hospital intervention. Maya configured an emergency sled system using aircraft debris and her own equipment, creating a transport method that would protect Chen from further environmental exposure while allowing movement over snow-covered terrain. The combination weight of patient, medical equipment, survival gear, and weapon systems exceeded 180 pounds, more than Maya's own body weight, but her load-carrying techniques had prepared her for exactly this challenge. She began the return journey with steady determination that impressed the remaining survivors who watched her disappear into the storm. The trip back to the landing zone tested every aspect of Maya's physical and mental preparation. Navigating by compass and GPS while pulling an injured person through mountain terrain required constant decision-making about route selection, energy conservation, and medical monitoring. Chen's condition remained stable but critical throughout the 4-hour journey. Maya maintained radio contact with both the crash site and Fort Carson throughout the evacuation, providing medical updates and coordination information that allowed proper preparation for each patient's arrival. Her communications discipline remained professional despite physical exhaustion that would have overwhelmed less prepared personnel. "Base, this is a rescue team," Maya reported as she approached the landing zone with her first patient. "Package 1 is stabilized and ready for immediate medical evacuation. Hypothermia case requiring hospital intervention within 2 hours." The helicopter extraction went smoothly despite deteriorating weather, with Chen loaded and transported to definitive medical care, while Maya prepared for her second trip back to the crash site. The medical team's assessment confirmed that her field treatment had been executed perfectly, potentially saving Chen's life through proper emergency procedures. The return trip to collect the second patient involved retracing the same route through conditions that had worsened significantly during her absence. Maya's energy reserves were substantially depleted, but her endurance training had prepared her cardiovascular system for sustained effort under exactly these circumstances. Staff Sergeant David Kim, one of the spinal injury cases, required different transport techniques due to the critical nature of his back trauma. Maya configured a rigid spine board system that would prevent further injury while allowing movement over uneven terrain, demonstrating medical knowledge that exceeded most combat medics' capabilities. "How did you learn these medical procedures?" Kim asked as Maya prepared him for transport. "Your technique is more advanced than most field hospitals I've seen." Maya checked his immobilization one final time before beginning movement. "Extensive study, Sergeant. I believed this knowledge might be valuable someday." The second evacuation proved more challenging than the first due to Kim's spinal injury requirements and Maya's accumulating fatigue. Maintaining proper spinal alignment while navigating mountain terrain required constant attention to patient positioning and movement technique. Her preparation in emergency medical procedures proved essential as she monitored Kim's neurological status throughout the journey. Weather conditions continued deteriorating as Maya completed the second evacuation, with wind speeds approaching dangerous levels for helicopter operations. The pilot's assessment was grimly realistic. "Rodriguez, we might have one more flight window before conditions become impossible. After that, we're looking at 48 to 72 hours before extraction becomes feasible." Maya calculated the remaining patients against time and weather constraints, knowing that her next decision would determine whether everyone survived or some were left behind to face almost certain death in the worsening storm. The mathematics were unforgetting, but her preparation had anticipated exactly this scenario. "I can get them both out on the next trip," Maya announced, surprising everyone monitoring the operation. "Combined transport using modified evacuation techniques." The third and final evacuation represented the ultimate test of everything Maya had learned during months of unauthorized preparation. Transporting 2 patients simultaneously, Captain Hayes with altitude sickness and Private Jennifer Walsh with spinal injuries, required innovative rigging that distributed weight across multiple carrying systems while maintaining medical stability for both patients. Maya's equipment modifications proved crucial as she configured a dual patient transport system using aircraft debris, emergency equipment, and her own gear in ways that conventional rescue doctrine wouldn't have imagined. The total weight approached 220 pounds, but her biomechanical understanding allowed distribution across her frame in ways that made the load manageable. The journey became an endurance test that pushed Maya beyond every limit she'd previously experienced. Her cardiovascular conditioning, developed through months of high-altitude training, sustained her through terrain that would have defeated soldiers significantly larger and stronger. Her mental resilience, built through countless hours of psychological preparation, maintained her focus when physical discomfort threatened to overwhelm her determination. Navigation became increasingly difficult as the storm intensified, with visibility dropping to 0 and wind speeds that made progress nearly impossible. Maya relied on compass bearings and dead reckoning skills she'd developed during private study, maintaining accurate movement toward the extraction point despite conditions that would have disoriented experienced mountain guides. Radio communications became intermittent as atmospheric disturbance interfered with signal transmission, but Maya continued providing position updates when possible. Her professional communications discipline remained steady despite physical exhaustion that pushed her beyond normal human endurance limits. "Base, this is a rescue team," Maya reported as she approached the landing zone with her first patient. "Final packages are stable and moving toward extraction. Estimated arrival 30 minutes if weather holds." The response from Fort Carson carried amazement that bordered on belief. "Rescue team, confirm you're transporting 2 patients simultaneously over mountain terrain in current weather conditions?" Maya adjusted her patient rigging before responding. "Affirmative, base. Both patients are stable and properly secured. Medical status is satisfactory for transport." The final approach to the landing zone required every technique Maya had learned during her preparation. Her load-carrying methods, developed through trial and error during countless training sessions, allowed her to maintain patient safety while navigating terrain that would challenge unloaded climbers.
Maya began unpacking medical equipment with practiced efficiency, her months of preparation transforming into life-saving action under conditions that would challenge experienced mountain rescue teams. The real test was just beginning, treating multiple critical patients and evacuating them through 20 miles of mountain wilderness in deteriorating weather. But as she looked at the injured survivors who depended on her capabilities, Maya felt only calm determination. Everything she'd trained for had led to this moment, and she was ready to prove that preparation could overcome any limitation others chose to impose. The medical triage took Maya exactly 18 minutes to complete, working with methodical precision that masked the complexity of treating multiple critical patients simultaneously in sub-zero mountain conditions. Her unauthorized medical training translated directly into life-saving procedures as she stabilized the hypothermia patient using emergency warming protocols, immobilized the spinal injury cases with proper technique, and administered altitude sickness treatment that prevented potentially fatal cerebral edema. Captain Robert Hayes, the senior surviving officer, watched in amazement as Maya worked with equipment efficiency that rivaled experienced combat medics. "Soldier, what's your medical background? Your technique is exceptional." Maya continued establishing IV lines while responding. "Sir, I've studied emergency medical procedures extensively. These patients are stable for transport, but we need to begin movement immediately. The weather window is closing rapidly." The evacuation plan Maya had developed during her approach required innovative solutions that conventional rescue doctrine wouldn't have considered. With 4 patients requiring various levels of medical support and only 1 rescuer available, she needed to move them in stages while maintaining life support capability throughout the 20-mile journey to the extraction point. "Sir, I'm going to evacuate patients individually," Maya explained to Captain Hayes, who remained conscious despite his altitude sickness. "Most critical cases first, with fastest turnaround time possible between trips." Hayes studied Maya's compact frame and the massive equipment load she'd already carried through impossible terrain. "Soldier, you're talking about making multiple round trips through mountain wilderness in these conditions. That's physically impossible for anyone, regardless of their capabilities." Maya was already configuring her equipment for patient transport, using techniques she'd practiced during countless hours of preparation that nobody knew about. "Sir, I've trained specifically for this scenario. The physics work if you understand proper load distribution and energy management." The first evacuation involved Sergeant Lisa Chen, the most critical hypothermia case, whose core temperature had dropped to dangerous levels requiring immediate hospital intervention. Maya configured an emergency sled system using aircraft debris and her own equipment, creating a transport method that would protect Chen from further environmental exposure while allowing movement over snow-covered terrain. The combined weight of patient, medical equipment, survival gear, and weapons systems exceeded 180 pounds, more than Maya's own body weight, but her load-carrying techniques had prepared her for exactly this challenge. She began the return journey with steady determination that impressed the remaining survivors who watched her disappear into the storm.
The trip back to the landing zone tested every aspect of Maya's physical and mental preparation. Navigating by compass and GPS while pulling an injured person through mountain terrain required constant decision-making about route selection, energy conservation, and medical monitoring. Chen's condition remained stable but critical throughout the 4-hour journey. Maya maintained radio contact with both the crash site and Fort Carson throughout the evacuation, providing medical updates and coordination information that allowed proper preparation for each patient's arrival. Her communications discipline remained professional despite physical exhaustion that would have overwhelmed less prepared personnel. "Base, this is a rescue team," Maya reported as she approached the landing zone with her first patient. "Package 1 is stabilized and ready for immediate medical evacuation, hypothermia case requiring hospital intervention within 2 hours." The helicopter extraction went smoothly despite deteriorating weather, with Chen loaded and transported to definitive medical care while Maya prepared for her second trip back to the crash site. The medical team's assessment confirmed that her field treatment had been executed perfectly, potentially saving Chen's life through proper emergency procedures. The return trip to collect the second patient involved retracing the same route through conditions that had worsened significantly during her absence. Maya's energy reserves were substantially depleted, but her endurance training had prepared her cardiovascular system for sustained effort under exactly these circumstances. Staff Sergeant David Kim, one of the spinal injury patients, required different transport techniques due to the critical nature of his back trauma. Maya configured a rigid spine board system that would prevent further injury while allowing movement over uneven terrain, demonstrating medical knowledge that exceeded most combat medics' capabilities. "How did you learn these medical procedures?" Kim asked as Maya prepared him for transport. "Your technique is more advanced than most field hospitals I've seen." Maya checked his immobilization one final time before beginning movement. "Extensive study, sir. I believed this knowledge might be valuable someday." The second evacuation proved more challenging than the first due to Kim's spinal injury requirements and Maya's accumulating fatigue. Maintaining proper spinal alignment while navigating mountain terrain required constant attention to patient positioning and movement technique. Her preparation in emergency medical procedures proved essential as she monitored Kim's neurological status throughout the journey. Weather conditions continued deteriorating as Maya completed the second evacuation, with wind speeds approaching dangerous levels for helicopter operations. The pilot's assessment was grimly realistic. "Rodriguez, we might have one more flight window before conditions become impossible. After that, we're looking at 48 to 72 hours before extraction becomes feasible." Maya calculated the remaining patients against time and weather constraints, knowing that her next decision would determine whether everyone survived or some were left behind to face almost certain death in the worsening storm. The mathematics were unforgiving, but her preparation had anticipated exactly this scenario. "I can get them both out on the next trip," Maya announced, surprising everyone monitoring the operation. "Combined transport using modified evacuation techniques." The third and final evacuation represented the ultimate test of everything Maya had learned during months of unauthorized preparation. Transporting 2 patients simultaneously, Captain Hayes with altitude sickness and Private Jennifer Walsh with spinal injuries, required innovative rigging that distributed weight across multiple carrying systems while maintaining medical stability for both patients. Maya's equipment modifications proved crucial as she configured a dual patient transport system using aircraft debris, emergency equipment, and her own gear in ways that conventional rescue doctrine wouldn't have imagined. The total weight approached 220 pounds, but her biomechanical understanding allowed distribution across her frame in ways that the load manageable. The journey became an endurance test that pushed Maya beyond every limit she'd previously experienced. Her cardiovascular conditioning, developed through months of high-altitude training, sustained her through terrain that would have defeated soldiers significantly larger and stronger. Her mental resilience, built through countless hours of psychological preparation, maintained her focus when physical discomfort threatened to overwhelm her determination. Navigation became increasingly difficult as the storm intensified, with visibility dropping to 0 and wind speeds that made progress nearly impossible. Maya relied on compass bearings and dead reckoning skills she'd developed during private study, maintaining accurate movement toward the extraction point despite conditions that would have disoriented experienced mountain guides.
Radio communications became intermittent as atmospheric disturbance interfered with signal transmission, but Maya continued providing position updates when possible. Her professional communications discipline remained steady despite physical exhaustion that pushed her beyond normal human endurance limits. "Base, this is a rescue team," Maya reported as she approached the landing zone with her first patient. "Final packages are stable and moving toward extraction. Estimated arrival 30 minutes if weather holds." The response from Fort Carson carried amazement that bordered on disbelief. "Rescue team, confirm you're transporting 2 patients simultaneously over mountain terrain and current weather conditions?" Maya adjusted her patient rigging before responding. "Affirmative, base. Both patients are stable and properly secured. Medical status is satisfactory for transport." The final approach to the landing zone required every technique Maya had learned during her preparation. Her load-carrying methods, developed through trial and error during countless training sessions, allowed her to maintain patient safety while navigating terrain that would challenge unloaded climbers.
Her endurance training showed its ultimate value, as she sustained effort that exceeded normal human capability. The combination of high altitude, extreme weather, massive equipment load, and patient responsibility created conditions that would have been impossible without the specific preparation she'd undertaken during months of unofficial training. The helicopter extraction represented a victory that transcended simple mission success. Maya had systematically demolished every assumption about her limitations while proving that preparation could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Her 20-mile journey carrying the Barrett M82, M240B, and multiple patients through mountain wilderness had redefined what was possible for someone of her physical characteristics. As the helicopter lifted off with all survivors safely aboard, Maya felt transformation that went beyond personal achievement. She had proven that capability couldn't be measured through conventional metrics, that intelligence and preparation could overcome limitations others considered absolute. The debriefing at Fort Carson 3 days later involved senior officers whose understanding of human capability had been fundamentally challenged by Maya's performance. Colonel Martinez presided over the after-action review with an expression that mixed professional pride with personal amazement. "Rodriguez, your performance during this rescue operation represents the most extraordinary display of individual capability I've witnessed in over 2 decades of military service," Martinez began. "You carried equipment loads that exceed theoretical human limits over terrain that challenges our most experienced mountain soldiers." Maya stood at attention, her uniform immaculate despite having completed a mission that would have defeated entire rescue teams. "Thank you, ma'am. I was prepared for the mission requirements." "Prepared how?" asked the operations officer who had questioned her capabilities just days earlier. "Your unauthorized training program appears to have created capabilities that exceed our institutional understanding of human potential." The admission revealed the scope of Maya's achievement while highlighting institutional failures that had kept her talents hidden. She had systematically developed expertise that exceeded official training programs through personal initiative that violated direct orders to focus exclusively on assigned duties. "Ma'am, I studied subjects I believed would be valuable for mission success: mountain warfare, emergency medicine, endurance physiology, load-carrying techniques. I wanted to be ready if opportunities arose." Colonel Martinez consulted a file that contained preliminary analysis of Maya's rescue mission. "Rodriguez, medical evaluation of your patients shows treatment that exceeds combat medic standards. Your evacuation techniques demonstrate innovation that military doctrine doesn't address. Your physical performance suggests capabilities that redefine human potential." The recognition felt surreal after 2 years of systematic exclusion and dismissal. Maya had proven herself under the most demanding conditions possible, but the validation came wrapped in acknowledgement of institutional blindness that had nearly wasted exceptional capabilities. "Furthermore," continued Martinez, "you've received commendation requests from multiple agencies. Colorado National Guard, Mountain Rescue Association, and Emergency Medical Services have all requested detailed analysis of your techniques for incorporation into their training programs." Maya blinked, uncertain she'd heard correctly. Her unauthorized preparation was being recognized not just as effective, but as innovative enough to influence official training doctrine across multiple organizations.
Rodriguez, effective immediately, you're being reassigned to the Mountain Warfare Training Center in Vermont as a specialized instructor, announced Martinez. Your responsibilities will include developing load-carrying techniques, high-altitude rescue procedures, and endurance training programs for special operations personnel. The transformation was complete but shocking in its scope. Maya had evolved from overlooked logistics personnel to recognized expert whose innovations would influence elite military training. Additionally, Martinez continued, you're being promoted to staff sergeant with recommendation for advanced military education that will prepare you for leadership positions in specialized operations. Maya struggled to find her voice. Ma'am, thank you. I'm honored by the recognition and ready for whatever assignments follow. As the briefing concluded and Maya prepared for her new career trajectory, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 20 miles of mountain terrain, carrying equipment that others claimed was impossible, had transformed not just her career, but institutional understanding of what determination and preparation could accomplish. She was no longer the soldier who was too small for combat operations. She was Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, mountain warfare specialist, whose Barrett M82 and M240B evacuation had redefined the boundaries of human capability and opened doors she'd never imagined possible. The transformation was complete, but Maya understood that her real journey was just beginning. She had proven that limitations existed primarily in the minds of those who imposed them, and that proper preparation could overcome obstacles that seemed impossible to those who never tried to transcend them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.